Marcus Chen was 43 years old, a self-made billionaire who'd built a tech empire from nothing. He lived in a 15,000 square foot penthouse in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. He had everything money could buy. Cars, art, property across 3 continents. He worked 18-hour days, slept 4 hours a night, and measured his worth in zeros behind a number. He had a staff of 7 people who kept his life running. Chef, driver, personal assistant, security, and a housekeeper named Elena Rodriguez who'd worked for him for 3 years. Elena was 32, originally from the Philippines, sending most of her salary back to her family in Manila. She was quiet, efficient, invisible in the way household staff learn to be around wealthy employers. Marcus barely noticed her. To him, she was just the woman who made sure his home was clean, his clothes were pressed, his life was frictionless. Then one night, Marcus came home exhausted from a business trip, walked into what he thought was his bedroom, and realized too late he'd opened the wrong door. What he saw in that room destroyed every assumption he'd made about the woman who worked for him. This isn't a story about a billionaire and his maid. It's a story about what happens when you realize the person you've ignored for 3 years is carrying a weight you never imagined, and whether wealth means anything when you've been blind to suffering happening 15 feet from your bedroom. Marcus had bought the penthouse 5 years earlier. It was a status symbol, a trophy, proof he'd made it. The master suite took up the entire east wing. The staff quarters were in the west wing, small efficient rooms where his employees could stay if needed. Elena lived there full-time. Marcus had approved the arrangement without ever seeing her room. He'd never been to that part of the penthouse. Why would he? That was staff space. He lived in his world, they lived in theirs. That was the arrangement. Marcus didn't know Elena's last name until he had to sign her Christmas bonus check. He didn't know she had a daughter back in Manila. He didn't know she worked for him because her daughter had a rare heart condition that required surgery costing more than Elena could make in a lifetime in the Philippines. He didn't know any of it. Because he'd never asked. Because to Marcus, Elena was a function, not a person. She cleaned. She organized. She existed in the background of his life, and that was all he needed from her. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The night it happened, Marcus had flown back from Singapore. 14-hour flight, back-to-back meetings, 3 hours of sleep in the past 48 hours. He came home at 2 a.m., exhausted, jet-lagged, barely conscious. The penthouse was dark. Everyone was asleep. Marcus walked down the hallway toward his bedroom, opened what he thought was his door, and stepped inside. The layout was wrong. The windows were smaller. The bed was smaller. And Elena was sitting on the edge of it, back to the door, wearing a simple nightgown, holding something in her hands. She hadn't heard him come in. Marcus was about to apologize and leave when he realized what she was holding. A photograph. And she was crying. Not quiet crying. Sobbing. Her whole body shaking with it. Marcus froze. He should have left immediately. He knew that. But something about the rawness of her grief stopped him. He'd never seen Elena show emotion. In 3 years, she'd been nothing but composed, professional, pleasant. This was something else. This was a woman breaking apart in private, believing no one could see. Marcus cleared his throat softly. Elena spun around, startled, immediately wiping her face and standing. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were home, Marcus held up a hand. "No, I'm sorry. I thought this was my room. I'm jet-lagged. I apologize for intruding." He should have left then. But he didn't. He found himself asking, "Are you all right?" Elena's face did something complicated. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to put the professional mask back on and pretend he hadn't seen anything. But something in the moment, the lateness, the exhaustion, the fact that he'd asked, made her hesitate. She looked down at the photograph in her hands. Then she looked back at Marcus. And she said, "No. I'm not all right." Marcus stood in the doorway, not knowing what to do. Elena held out the photograph. "This is my daughter. Isabella. She's 8. She lives with my mother in Manila. She has a heart condition. She needs surgery. I've been trying to save enough to bring her here for treatment, but it costs $250,000. I've saved $40,000 in 3 years. At this rate, she'll be 12 before I can afford it. The doctors say she doesn't have that long." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He looked at the photograph. A little girl with dark hair and a bright smile, wearing a school uniform. He looked at Elena, really looked at her for the first time in 3 years. She was exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes he'd never noticed. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning work. She looked older than 32. She looked like someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight alone for a very long time. Marcus said, "How long have you been working here?" Elena said, 3 years, Mr. Chen. Marcus said, "And you've been saving for this surgery the entire time?" Elena nodded. Marcus said, "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena looked at him like he'd asked why she didn't tell him the sky was blue. She said, "You're my employer, Mr. Chen. This is my problem, not yours." Marcus sat down on the small chair in the corner of her room. He didn't ask permission. He just sat. He said, "Tell me about her." Elena hesitated. Then, slowly, she started talking. She told Marcus about Isabella. How smart she was. How she loved reading and wanted to be a teacher. How she'd been born with the heart condition and had been managing it with medication, but the doctors said she'd need surgery soon or the condition would worsen. How Elena had left Manila when Isabella was 5 because she couldn't make enough money there. How she sent most of her salary home and lived in this small room in a billionaire's penthouse while her daughter grew up 8,000 miles away. How she missed 3 birthdays. How she video called Isabella every Sunday. How Isabella always asked when mommy was coming home. How Elena didn't know how to tell her daughter that mommy couldn't come home until she'd saved enough money to fix her heart. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just listened. And somewhere in the listening, he realized something that made him deeply uncomfortable. He'd spent $250,000 on a painting in his living room. A painting he'd bought because his art consultant said it was a good investment. A painting he looked at maybe twice a year. He'd spent the exact amount Elena needed to save her daughter's life on a piece of canvas, and he'd made the decision in 15 minutes. If this story has your heart racing, comment "I'm still watching." When Elena finished talking, Marcus stood. He said, "I'll take care of it." Elena looked confused. Marcus said, "The surgery. I'll pay for it. I'll arrange for Isabella to be flown here, get her into the best pediatric cardiac program in the country, and cover all the costs. You shouldn't have to wait another 3 years." Elena stared at him. Then she started crying again. But this time it was different. She said, "I can't accept that, Mr. Chen. That's too much." Marcus said, "It's not too much. It's nothing. I spend more than that on things that don't matter. This matters." Elena shook her head. She said, "I can't take charity." Marcus said, "It's not charity. It's me recognizing that I've been paying you a salary that made it impossible for you to save your daughter's life in any reasonable time frame. It's me correcting a mistake." Elena said, "You pay me fairly." Marcus said, "Fairly by market standards, maybe. But not fairly by any human standard. You've been living in my home for 3 years, making my life easier while your daughter is dying 8,000 miles away, and I never once asked if you were okay. That's not fair. That's me being blind. The next day, Marcus didn't go to the office. He spent the morning making calls. His personal assistant arranged everything. Flights. Hospital consultations. Visa expediting. By the end of the week, Isabella and Elena's mother were on a plane to New York. Isabella had her surgery at Mount Sinai 2 weeks later. It was successful. Marcus paid for everything. The surgery. The hospital stay. The recovery. He set up a trust fund for Isabella's education. He gave Elena a raise. Not a small raise. A significant one. Enough that she could afford to bring Isabella to live with her in New York if she wanted. Enough that she didn't have to choose between being a mother and surviving financially. Elena cried when he told her. She said, "Why are you doing this?" Marcus said, "Because I walked into the wrong room and saw something I should have seen a long time ago." But the real answer, the one Marcus didn't say out loud, was more complicated. Because what he'd seen that night wasn't just Elena's pain. It was his own emptiness. He'd spent 20 years building wealth, accumulating things, measuring his worth in numbers, and he'd somehow convinced himself that was the same as building a life. He had 15,000 square feet of luxury and he lived in it alone. He had art and cars and property and no one to share any of it with. He had everything except the thing that mattered. Connection. Purpose. The knowledge that his existence meant something to someone. 2 months after the surgery, Isabella was healthy. She was living with Elena in the staff quarters, which suddenly felt too small. Marcus renovated the entire west wing, expanded it, turned it into a proper 2-bedroom apartment with a living area and a kitchen. Elena protested. Marcus insisted. He said, "Your daughter deserves a home, not a room." Isabella was shy around Marcus at first. Then one day she asked him if he liked reading. He said yes, though he hadn't read anything except business reports in years. She brought him one of her books. A children's fantasy novel about a girl who could talk to dragons. She said, "This is my favorite." Marcus read it. Not because he cared about dragons, but because Isabella had shared something important to her. The next time he saw her, he told her what he thought. Her face lit up. They started talking about books. Then about school. Then about everything. Marcus found himself looking forward to coming home, not because of the penthouse, but because Isabella would be there, excited to tell him about her day. 6 months after walking into the wrong room, Marcus's life looked almost the same from the outside. Same penthouse. Same company. Same wealth. But from the inside, everything had changed. He'd started a foundation funding medical care for children of domestic workers. He'd changed his company's benefits policy to include full healthcare for employees' families, even if those families lived overseas. He'd restructured his staff's compensation to be more than fair by market standards. He'd started asking people how they were and actually listening to the answers. And he'd realized something that should have been obvious but somehow wasn't until that night. Wealth means nothing if you're not paying attention to the people around you. Success means nothing if you're succeeding alone. And the door you walk through by mistake might be the only one that matters. Marcus Chen is 45 now. Elena still works for him, but their relationship is different. She's not invisible anymore. She's family. Isabella is 10, healthy, thriving in school, talking about becoming a doctor so she can help other kids like her. Marcus is still a billionaire, still runs his company, still works too much. But now when he comes home, there's a little girl who runs to hug him and a woman who greets him by name, not by title. And sometimes, late at night, Marcus thinks about the moment he opened the wrong door. The single biggest mistake of his life that turned out to be the only thing he ever did right. Because sometimes the only way to find what matters is to stop looking for it and stumble into it by accident. This is Marcus's hidden chapter. Not his business success. Not his wealth. Not the empire he built. The hidden chapter is the night he walked into a room he'd never noticed and saw a person he'd never seen. The 3 years he spent living 15 feet away from someone suffering and never once asking if they needed help. The moment he realized that ignoring people doesn't make you successful, it makes you empty. And the choice he made, in that small room at 2 in the morning, to stop being blind. If you've ever been so focused on your own life that you missed someone else's pain, if you've ever realized you've been blind to suffering happening right in front of you, if you've ever had a moment that completely changed how you see the world, then you understand Marcus's hidden chapter. Sometimes the most important doors aren't the ones you mean to open. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest mistakes. Sometimes walking into the wrong room is the only way to find the right life. What would you have done? If you'd seen your employee crying alone, would you have asked? Or would you have walked away? Drop your answer in the comments. There's no right answer. Just the one you could live with. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next hidden chapter.